Hi, I'm Gerard Virga, and welcome to episode 22 of the Florida Family Law Attorney Podcast. And today we're going to be talking with David Lohr. He's the lead attorney over in our Pensacola office, and I've known him for years now, and inside and outside the courtroom, and we've become friends, of course, over the years. And he's somebody I think the world of, and we share a lot in common, from baseball to power tools to obsessions about shopping at Home Depot or Lowe's. We always joke who's going to build the shed first, so that when our wife throws us out, we can come live in the shed at their house. But David, we're just so glad to have you. Why don't you introduce yourself just to the audience?
Yeah, David Lohr. I run the Pensacola office for the Virga Law Firm. Like Gerard said, I love building. I love baseball. Love spending time with my child, and I actually love family law, which is weird to say. Some people would say, but that's what I like to do.
Well, David, we've been talking about this a lot on the various episodes, and I find that people who really love family law have a strong why. Why they're doing it. Would you mind sharing with us your why and why you do family law?
Well, it started. I guess I really would say it started before law school. I had a legal issue in my family that ultimately it was actually on a guardianship probate type scenario, but it wasn't dealt with. I had an incapacitated family member that was in charge of a business, and nobody wanted to do anything because it was a bad decision. They felt like they were hurting their feelings or something like that, and they never really sought legal advice. And I saw it. It ended up costing my family members a substantial amount of money and time and grief and a lot of anguish. And then that got me into law school, and I actually was clerked and paralegal for a family law firm while I was in law school. I got out and I said, I'm going to go do construction litigation and civil litigation with insurance companies, because that was kind of my background with the family. Was, hey, I knew a lot about building stuff. So I went and did that and realized it was all about numbers. It wasn't about people. You pick people up off the tarmac that are fighting over $100,000 in a multi-million-dollar contract, and it just didn't seem like I was helping anybody. I was just bickering over pennies. So I got an opportunity a long time ago to go back to family law a couple years into my practice, and I've been doing it ever since. So
I think that's something powerful. You just said that family law is about people and
yeah,
helping people, and I think you got to try and draw upon that every day you do it, and those people have to be your why, and that's very powerful what you just said there. With me, I started out with the Attorney General's office, and then after I did some time there, I got a job doing franchise litigation against General Motors, representing big car dealerships, and you know, same kind of thing. After a little bit of time doing that, you're arguing over the cost of a showroom floor, or was there good faith in the franchise agreement, and at the end of the day, sometimes you lose sight of the people. You just start looking at it as figures on a balance sheet, and that was one of the things that drew me into family law when I had my opportunity. Really making a difference in somebody's life, I felt was much more gratifying than making a difference on a balance sheet sometimes.
100% more fulfilling, I would say.
Yeah, it's harder to do at times because it's much easier to deal with numbers than to deal with human emotion. But
I most definitely had more hair, as I say, but I do enjoy it. So
well, our ongoing joke is you've lost your hair and I've lost all the color in mine. In fact, one time I never will forget this. We have to have a sense of humor in family law, and one time I decided to grow a beard, and David got on Zoom and said, "I don't know if I was talking to my boss or Kenny Rogers," and I thought that was the funniest thing ever. I mean, I still, anytime I don't shave for a while, I start thinking about that, and maybe Halloween's coming up, maybe Kenny will make a comeback. But one of the things I really enjoy about working with you is our friendship, and inside the practice, and being able to call you and talk with you, and vent, and also bounce legal ideas off of you. But we had a unique experience outside the courtroom just a few months ago, our wives got together and decided they were going to pull us away from work, and we went and saw a monster truck rally, a race, or whatever you call it, over in Pensacola. And I want to know what were your takeaways from the monster truck event?
Well, I had not been to a monster truck show since I was probably a teenager at the Greensboro Coliseum, which is a pretty large coliseum. And I was sitting there thinking, how are they going to get them in the Pensacola Bay Center? Like, this is going to be nuts. And then we got there, and you're right up on the trucks, and those kids are having a blast, and they had way more sugar than they ever should have. And that it was an awesome opportunity to get the boys together and us spend a little time together and watch. I mean, everybody, that place was packed out, community, and I had multiple shows, those people doing crazy things with those huge trucks. So yeah, it was pretty awesome.
I'll never forget. It was typical Gerard and David fashion that before the monster truck show, we parlayed that into a trip to the Home Depot to get hearing protection and
Oh
get
yeah.
earplugs. And I may or may not bought something for myself while I was there, but I'll take the fifth on that one. But I thought that was kind of fun. Now, you're a dad, I'm a dad, and one of the things that we also talk about when we're not talking shop is Little League baseball. And so it's my understanding that Wyatt's he's doing fall ball this year.
Yeah, yeah. So, Wyatt is young. He's only 6, but he's very, very tall, much taller than his dad. He's going to be taller than me by the time he's 10. But yeah, he's doing fall ball. This is we were counting it up, his 7th season as at the age of 6. So that's, he's considered a veteran out there. But it's been awesome. The coaches are great. They're really helping with, being positive and getting these kids a lot of kids are just starting baseball at that point, and they even came to Wyatt and said, "Hey, we want you to be a leader out there." And I think it's been great for him. It's awesome to see kids develop and have fun and love baseball, because I think with all the rules and all the team aspect, it really builds character for him. So it's great.
Yeah. You know, I played ball. I thought I had a passion for ball until I started, of course, I'm married to my wife. My wife makes my passion for baseball look very small. She is, just a typical like baseball mom, into it. She lives for it, and I know you're kind of like the same way. And I always think it's funny when I'm on the phone with you and you're at the game, and all of a sudden we'll be in the middle of a sentence about work, and you start hollering and screaming and carrying on, and
Yeah.
it reminds me of the baseball field. Sometimes I have to be like, whoa, whoa, Mary, calm down, calm down,
I
calm down.
Yeah, I try to just be a fan when I'm there. I don't do any coaching, but I'm just proud of. I mean, everybody's proud of their kids. You
Yeah,
got some great ones too, but it's like, he's put in so much effort even through 6 years old. I mean, he's literally batting left-handed this year for this season. I just can't say more about it. And I love it. I love the game. It's a great game.
so we might have to start taking some CLEs on sports and entertainment law at
Yes,
the way Wyatt's
I'm
doing here.
officially his manager. So
Yeah. Um, you know, but I think, like you said, in today's world, socializing children, getting them out there, getting them away from iPhones, iPads, technology, exercise, and then just getting them into a rule based sport, where you have leadership skills and you can develop that working together as a team. I think that's critical, and that's one of the things that Mary and I kind of feel about baseball. Is it a lot of fun? Absolutely. Do I think there's a degree of some vicarious living through your kid, and remembering your glory days, or your days at the ballpark with your grandpa watching games? Um, Absolutely, but I think that's something that a lot of times, with modern parenting and society, that I think we get sometimes we overlook. It was something simple that we all had and kind of took for granted, but I think it helps them be able to better communicate, to work together, not be in isolation. I think there's a lot of physical and mental health and developmental skills that are learned on the baseball field. And I know that every time we get an opportunity to sponsor some sort of a baseball or sporting team for kids, that we feel very passionate about that and getting them out there. My daughter has been doing some swim. She was on the news the other day, and they interviewed her for swim and dive. And we sponsored that team. We were out about a week ago sponsoring a football team. And that's one of the things I really enjoy, and I think that we come together well and support our student athletes, and try to give them the opportunities to enjoy that and to learn that leadership and that grit that sports teaches you. But we do family law, and it always comes up in family law as juggling extracurriculars and work. And I know you've been juggling workload, expedited dockets, judges are moving cases a lot faster, it seems, lately, and then juggling baseball, being a family man. How do you juggle it all, David?
Well, you just have to be diligent and you have to adapt, just like anything else. And one of the things we've done is, we've started adding some after hours meetings with clients that, hey, they couldn't get off work either. So some of those things, that's how we're getting ahead of things, is just trying to make sure we're available at times. Everybody else can be available, and just make sure we're organized and ready to go. And that's all you can do. It starts with organization and planning, and then goes from there and implementation. And it doesn't always go the way you want it in the implementation phases, because things change. And like you said, you may have a hearing that you didn't know you were going to have, that was special set, or and you just got to be as prepared as you can be.
I think family law reminds me of this quote from John Lennon: "Life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans."
That's exactly
And
right.
I have a plan for my case. I have a plan for my day, and it inevitably, deviates off track because the cases are always moving. They're organic. They're fluid. Something's changing, or one case that was kind of thought was in a holding posture and maybe waiting for your hearing next month, and then it's something has sparked it off again. And I find that to kind of be challenging. But I'll pay you a compliment. I was been listening to Extreme Ownership, and I've been listening to You Can't Hurt Me, which is my wife's audiobook, but I've been listening to it with her. And they're both by Navy SEALs, and one of the principles that kept coming up was owning the morning. And if you own the morning, then you can own the day, but you have to own the morning, and that's where you can carve out the extra time. They do talk about going to bed early. And one thing I'll say about you, David, is I always feel like you own the morning. I feel like I'm always behind you there, because it'll always be I'm getting ready for work or about to get in the shower, and I'll get a phone call from David, and I feel bad because he's already at work. He's, hey, I got a question about this, or what do you think about that? But I think that's one thing that a lot of people could learn from you. Is I think that you wake up and you own the morning hours before the game even starts, and I think that's admirable.
I
That's something I need to work on.
I don't know that I planned on that in my life. I think I was raised on a farm, and I was required to get up and deal with animals before I went to school, and it just kind of it was set for me from a very early age that that's where it starts. Sun comes up, you're up. You're a farmer, you go do it. And it's kind of spilled over, and it's been a great thing for me professionally. Plus, I'm blessed enough to have a paralegal who also is a morning person and comes in super early, so we can get 2 hours on the competition, as we call it, right off the bat before 8 o'clock. So that's
Yeah,
nice.
I think that may be where we're where we might complement each other, because I'm the night owl,
Yes.
and sometimes I may have made the mistake of calling you too late. But I I call it three shifts. First shift's work, second shift's husband and dad, third shift everybody goes to sleep, and I go back on my laptop and go back to it, and I find that when the house is quiet, um, everybody's asleep, then I can kind of reflect on what I need to do, and kind of progress the agenda along that way. and I don't feel guilt because I don't want to cut into the family time, so I cut into a little bit of the sleep time. And I'm just one of those people who's a little more alert in the evenings, unfortunately, than I am in the morning. But that may also have something to do with my caffeine addiction. It may be that the caffeine is carrying me later and making me want to sleep more after I go to sleep. But David, um, you know, I was going to ask you, like with Pensacola and over in that office that you're in,
Hmm.
you know, what do you think makes practicing family law in Pensacola and Santa Rosa counties, unique from other places you may have practiced?
Well, I would say originally I was over on the East Coast and I went to some very large markets. I was traveling up and down, from Brevard County, Cocoa Beach area down to Miami and Fort Lauderdale and some of these bigger areas. And I would say here there's a smaller community of family lawyers that actually do this regularly, I would say. We're dealing with the same 4 to 6 judges on a regular basis or magistrates on a regular basis. You're dealing with the same people. I think what it creates is a environment of accountability because you're going to be in front of those individuals regularly, and I think it also gives a great basis for us because then we know generally what to expect. I mean, we can't always predict it. We have no crystal ball, but we have an idea of what the judge likes in their courtroom and what they expect from each. Because every judge is different in how they deal with things. It's good to be able to know a little bit about them and have that. You generally need to be reasonable, with the other side and outside of the courtroom because you're going to see them again. It's not like you're in Miami and you may see that person once a year. You're probably seeing them multiple times a year. From the dynamic of the population here, we have a huge amount of military, which is great. We have a great military population here. A lot of them live in Santa Rosa County, so we get Santa Rosa County cases, but a lot of them live in Escambia as well. Even as far as Okaloosa, you look at, you got Hurlburt and Eglin, but over here we have the Navy base, we have NAS, we have Whiting Field, we have Duke Field. All of those, employ a large number of military and contract laborers, and then we also have the Navy Federal Credit Union. We have a large hub here, so we have a lot of people that are all doing similar work and all a pretty good community. So
Well, I think, too, touching on what you just said, I think we're kind of a unique place in the Northwest Florida area, Pensacola, Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, Walton, Bay. Um, I was at the Florida Bar Committee meetings, and those are usually, the family law section meets. It's usually in South Florida or Central South Florida area. And, when I was there, they were asking me, do you have cases with like the same attorneys all the time? Like that was foreign. And it was very hard for me to imagine that I would be seeing the same family law attorneys again and again. And, I'm sure that they have some overlap where they live, but, we have overlap, on a lot of the cases. And I think, if done correctly and you have a opposing counsel that's reasonable and that you can build a rapport with, I think sometimes that may give me the ability to call them up and say, hey, like we've done this before, we've done this dance, we've seen this similar fat pattern before. What can we do to kind of cut to the chase and get this over for everybody and get it over in an amicable way? If you can build those relationships. But I also think that, your professionalism has to be on point because when you deal with the same attorneys time and time again, and you've done something that, is not professional, they're going to remember that. You don't get a redo with a fresh start a lot of the time. And, I think that's where, character and professionalism and ethics kind of come into play. And I think that tight knitness of where we live and the same people, doing the cases, I think, kind of creates a set of rules, standards that are maybe unique to our geographic area. But I thought that was kind of interesting, their perspective versus our perspective on, seeing the same people. And I wouldn't want it any other way. I enjoy seeing the same people. And from a litigator standpoint, if we have to go to litigation, I like to know how David plays the game, or I like to know how the other side's going to approach things. It allows me to develop a strategy, you know, based on how I know they're going to, usually present their case, um, and what to expect. When you going into the unknown and you're in a situation like that, to me, it's a lot more nerve wracking than going into the known.
Well, it goes. I'll go back to baseball for a minute because that's easy for me. It's if I'm going in the courtroom, I'm going in there to be a gladiator. I'm going in there to leave it all on the field. And
Mm-hmm.
when I come off the field, I'm still going to shake your hand and say good game, and we're still going to be cordial. And I think that with the small community we have of litigators in the area and the limited number of judges we deal with on a regular basis, I think that facilitates, hey, we know what, like you said, we know what we know what the expectation is. There's a better opportunity for us to resolve it without litigation, or alternatively fight it, narrow the issues so we're not wasting money and time. So
Absolutely. Um, so if you're facing a family law case and you're in Escambia County or Santa Rosa County, can you tell somebody what they can expect when they walk into like the local courthouse over there?
okay, you come through the door in Escambia County. And you go through the metal detector. Same way would be with Santa Rosa as well. It's a brand new courthouse over in Santa Rosa, but in Escambia, you come through the metal detectors. There'll be bailiffs there, and there'll be somebody up in the tower watching. Um, Everybody is super cordial. You come through, they make you take your belt off for and everything off and go through, and then you've got to figure out where you're going to go. What floor am I on? There's a sheet on the wall every morning that's updated. Don't stress out. If I'm representing you, look for me. But you know, you go to that sheet and you figure out where your judge is at today. And I will say that one of the things that misconception for people that do that are family litigants or parties is they think they're going to go into this big courtroom and there's going to be a million people there. And I find that most of our hearings, short of like a domestic violence issue, they may be in a big courtroom in Escambia County because they rotate the judges around based on, hey, do we need Zoom today? Do we need the electronic TV screen? Do we need, what do we need for this particular hearing? So you may be in a courtroom, but you may just as well be at a conference room table with the judge, and you're sitting there, almost like we're having a conversation now, except it's more formal because it's a hearing, and there's not anybody else there. I think that's one of the things that everybody gets. They think it's going to be law and order, and there's going to be 100 people there, but you still are expected to, not be in a t-shirt and a hat and be cordial, and remember that the judge has total control over what's going on in that courtroom, and it doesn't matter if you're in their chambers or you're in a courtroom. You could still, if you're not, listening to what they say, could end up in trouble. So
Yeah. That brings me back to a quote somebody told me once. The judge is never wrong, and the judge is never late. And always keep that in mind, and always be respectful with that. Um, you know, we'll we'll digress a little bit here, and you know, one of the things that I hate about being a lawyer is when we go through security and we have to take our belt off. Um, because if your pants don't fit just snugly, you're kind of doing the penguin walk. If you're, and then you have the wagons of or carts of notebooks and other things, exhibits. You're trying to get that through the security line. And I will say, Escambia County runs a tight ship. I
that's right.
asked them one time, kind of joking around, what if I got a belt that didn't have metal in it? And they told me it would still come off because I might be hiding something behind it. I was like, what if it's translucent? And they said, no, it's still coming off regardless. You're not going to come through here with a belt, because I'm always, my one of my fears as a lawyer is having my pants drop during the metal detector as I'm going through and trying to get through all that. But security is very important. I'm joking around about it a little bit, but we want to make sure everybody's very safe in the courthouse, the judges, the litigants, the attorneys, and that has to be, especially in family law. In Bay County, years ago, before there was these type of security measures put into place, there was a case where a litigant and the judge were killed at the courthouse. So, it's very, very important. People don't realize that about family law attorneys, but I think if I remember correctly, if the statistic still holds, we're the most likely attorneys to be harmed because it's so emotional and it's so raw in the topics we deal with. And, so security is very important. And, I like to, when I get there, I'm not going to lie, I've been doing this, over 20 years and I still have a lot of nerves. And I, I think that's good. That's something I draw upon when I go to court as that energy, but I'm guilty of being there like 30 minutes, an hour early a lot of the time because I want to make sure that I know where I'm going. I'm referencing the sheet or the television screen in the different courthouses. I want to be out in the lobby ahead of time. I want to have that peace of mind that I guess zen, that everything's good. I'm prepared. I'm not flustered, so that when the game starts, I don't feel any anxiety about things I could control because there's going to be so many things going on that you may not be able to control. And I think that one of the big shifts I've seen over the 20 years is there was no family law courtroom. It was just, like you said, the judge's chamber, conference rooms. That's how it was done. And now, I think every place pretty much has a family law courtroom and it gets used pretty regular. But I still miss a lot of the conference room table interactions because I'm sure that poses safety and security. It's probably part of the reasons for the push for family law having its own courtroom. But to me, it was a lot more to the client, a lot more easy to understand and feel comfortable with. Because I'm not gonna lie, when you walk into a courtroom, even now, I still feel like I'm on like criminal trial, as opposed to, yes, we're taking testimony, yes, we're it's a formal proceeding, but we're really here to try to get down to the bottom of what's a private matter between these two people. And the courtroom, I think, sometimes sends a signal to be formal, but it also sends a signal of like I'm in trouble, or So let me
Well,
ask you this, and this is totally off script. Are you a Zoom hearing man or are you an in-person hearing man? Because I'm finding lawyers and judges are either one or the other. What's your preference, honestly?
uh, honestly, I like the idea of Zoom and have everything and not traveling. But I would say that I'm still an in-person guy if I can do it. I think if you look at Zoom and the way it affects efficiency, if you have all your exhibits marked and everything electronically OCR'd and you can show it to the court just the same, I think that's great. I'm an in-person guy. I'm close to the courthouse here. We were talking about the bailiffs and going through the security. I just thought it was awesome the other week. I didn't even think about it, and it hit. I don't know why it hit me, but I guess I go through there enough that I was sick. A couple weeks ago, my kid went to school for the first week, came home and gave everybody the crud. Well, I was going through there sick a few days. Well, then the next week I came through, and those bailiffs that are making me take my belt off and everything else, she said, "Are you feeling better?" And I was like, "I am. Thank you very much." I just thought that was the nicest, like, hey, you even remembered that I was sick last week, and and we're nice enough to talk about it. But yeah, I would say I'm an in-person guy for the most part, just because if something, like you said, something unexpected happens, a witness says something that is a totally off script that you did not expect, and what we would generally term in the civil world as a lie. and you need to disprove it, you may have that rebuttal right in front of you, and hey, I can pull it out and show the judge and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Um, I think that I'm kind of conflicted on it. Um, we have one attorney here who is super on top of it, and especially with electronics and digital. And it panics me because I'm loading up my hand trucks with boxes of paper, and I look over, and she's got a laptop, and that's how she rolls, and she's very proficient with it. That works for her. Um, I do still crave the tangible paper, the exhibit. Do you recognize what I'm showing you? And being able to wiggle it in my hand and let them know I got the cards. Or, um, however, going back to safety and security and bringing the temperature down in the case, I have to say I like Zoom for those. For those reasons, I think Zoom offers a benefit because when we do Zoom, if the client lives in the local area, they just come to my conference room. I get them some water or some coffee. I try to get them comfortable, get the camera set up, and try to get the anxiety out that way. And hey, you've sat in my conference room at this point 100 times, so it's just another. If I'm asking you questions, it's no different than what we've been doing for months now. And you know, I think obviously it's hard to have a security risk when there people are separated and you don't know really where they're going to be appearing from. And
Yeah,
then I
and
think the other thing about it is, and maybe you've experienced this, but I have experienced cases where I thought we were going to probably settle in the hallway right before court, or if this was going to be um, a trial, but maybe a lower temperature trial, and inevitably somebody in the hallway of the courthouse does something to inflame the other spouse, or maybe brings in their new boyfriend or girlfriend and starts hugging and kissing them in front of the other spouse. Then we get, hard feelings, hurt feelings. If there was a chance to settle the morning of trial, that's probably evaporated. And then I'm usually getting the elbow with, I want you to go after him harder, which I'm not, like I said, I'm not opposed to trying a case and trying it to its fullest. But, I think sometimes Zoom actually benefits in ways that people don't think about. I know that there's a big efficiency kick, in my opinion, that the judges want the cases to move faster and think they'll move faster in person. But I'm of the opinion that Zoom, if the court will allow it, due to travel, timing, it's much easier to fit in smaller Zoom hearings where you have to, or to make yourself available, which I think kind of helps expedite it to a degree. But
I would agree with you. You've seen my setup over here. Obviously, this I love our office and our conference room. We've set up, a mic similar to what you've got, and tables actually turned towards the big screen TV with the Zoom camera. When we went through COVID, everything was Zoom, and it works great. And I can literally have my exhibits OCR'd up on the screen and do it that way. And I don't mind doing it that way at all. And I think efficiency wise, it helps. I am still finding that you know, um, I'm trying to say this as tactfully as possible. There are others out there in the world that are not as technologically efficient.
Zoom proficient, Zoom
Yeah, Zoom,
proficient is what I
yeah,
call it.
yeah, Zoom proficient, and it ends up causing problems for me, and I'm not the one causing them to some degree, and that I get that adds stress to me. I don't need, but no, it does bring down the temperature with the clients. I think they feel more comfortable because they're sitting at the same table they sat at when they met with me. So I think that is a good thing.
Well, you kind of talked about it already to a little degree. Um, Pensacola in large part, and Santa Rosa, the same. It's they're military communities. Um, can you tell us a little bit about military divorces and relocations and how that affects your day-to-day practice over in Pensacola?
Well, I would say 80% plus of our clients are military, and it may be higher than that. Honestly, I used to work in Fort Walton. I was there for 4 or 5 years, and there was a high population there. I think it's just as high or higher here at NAS. and they have the same issues that standard divorce and custody proceedings have, but they also have added components. You have a lot of relocating. Obviously, they're on military orders for 2 or 3 years at a time, sometimes even shorter than that, and they're moving. Um, they're going on TDYs. Some of the military members are going on TDYs for training and other purposes for, maybe it's a week. Sometimes it may be several weeks. It may be months, that they're going away. And you have a lot of benefits from the military side of things that maybe aren't necessarily civilian issues as a whole, whether it be military retirement issues, whether it be support requirements by their command and other things, VA issues. There's just added layers associated with that. But a large majority of our clients are military, which is sad to say that the military has so many, but they're under high stress environments, and their families are put to the test regularly. So we do deal with it on a regular basis. As far as the relocations go, with the statute, they get orders. That's something they have to be cognizant of, that if there's already some sort of custody agreement, maybe I'm going to need to petition the court or get a written agreement about what I'm doing for my relocation, because I'm going regardless if my kids go or not, because I'm on military orders. In contrast, the other spouse that's looking to go file for divorce, maybe they haven't filed for divorce yet. Maybe it's necessary for them to go ahead and file, because that will trigger the relocation statute, because they don't want to leave with the children. There's a lot of components from both sides that are dealt with, in what we do.
Yeah, I think for the audience out there, so that we're not talking a foreign language to listeners who are just getting into family law. Florida has a statute at 61.13001. That's our relocation statute, and it says that a parent can't move more than 50 miles if there's one, a pending proceeding, or two, there's a prior custody order that's in place. When that statute kind of first came into play, I was kind of shocked that there was not a special provision for military or something, but there's not. They have, if you're in the military, you have to play by the same rules. There's no there is special laws out there for short-term deployments, ways to handle time sharing in that regard. But as far as the all-out relocation, you have to just go through that statute. And I know that in my practice and in my years, I hear a lot of, but my husband got orders, or I have orders. And I think in a lot of people's mind, they think that, like, the supremacy clause of it's federal, and it's going to trump it, and it does not. You still have to follow that statute. And, I can only imagine how hard that is on a military family, with the moving, the relocating, the need to readjust the order, when that happens, when it comes to custody. And I know that you guys get just a lot of Navy, even probably some Air Force out in Santa Rosa County, because there are a lot of people in Santa Rosa County actually work in Eglin, and commute over. And then you have some Navy members that live in Escambia, but you also have some Navy members who opt to live in Santa Rosa and commute.
We even have some Marines. You'll have Marine pilots here. You'll have some Marines doing working here, and then you've got the Army Rangers and some of those guys that are on over there on Eglin and Hurlburt, that live in Santa Rosa but commute the other direction. But one thing I would say back to the relocation, which is kind of the meat of this, is I hear that a lot. I've got orders, and they're focused on, their whole life has been, I am service, I'm in service of my country. I do what I'm told, what I'm told to do. I'm ordered to do it, and I'm going to do it. They just, be cognizant when, if you're a military member or a spouse, or or have a child in a home where there's a custody agreement and the other side is a military member, if there's going to be a relocation because there's a PCS order, you need to jump on it early and deal with it early. Like don't wait till the last minute because you can get hung up where you're going and the children are still hung in limbo because they do have an expedited process for it, but the court systems aren't as fast as your life, really.
Yeah.
The other side of that is in the planning. If I'm going to be in the military for the next 12 years, maybe when we're doing the agreement, we need to go ahead and deal with that issue up front, so that we're saving everybody the heartache next time. So
Yeah, that's something I really strive for in my practice is if I have a military member, I do try to put provisions in the settlement agreement if everybody will agree about what happens, how do we handle this, what will the time sharing schedule look like, and proactively kind of do that because you can do that in an agreement. The problem with it is the judge, if you have a trial, the judge can't prospectively look forward. They can only rule on what's before them. Whereas an agreement is more of a contract. You're much more free to kind of deal with the parenting and these things that are coming back in play. And one thing I think that's kind of maybe changed the game a little bit in military relocations and military child custody cases, and I want your opinion on it. Is Florida Statute 6113 governs custody and time sharing and parenting plans, and it recently got an update that if the time of the last order you were more than 50 miles apart, and then you move close to within the or closer back to your child, you move within the 50 miles, then that's going to allow for a modification to occur without having to prove a substantial change in circumstances. You still have to prove the best interest, is served by modifying it. But I think lowering that bar, really helps if you were stationed here and mom was here and you were over 50 miles, or in today's world, the female could be the military member, and then you're able to get back or you get out the military and move close, you might be able to reopen the door without having to prove a substantial change, which to me is kind of a game changer. As even if you don't win the relocation, you can basically come back, move close, and the best interest standard is much lower than having to prove substantial change and the best interest. So, David, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with me, or do you have a different take?
I agree. I think it is a huge change in the law. If you look at it from the context of a substantial change, that tell everybody when they enter this final judgment, it is final. The whole idea is the court does not want to open the door for you to come back unless we have an extraordinary situation that we need to change it. Um, and that is such a high threshold that they have now made a way to get over that threshold, just by returning to the area. So if you kept your relationship with your children and you kept that relationship the whole time, and you serve your time and you come back from your military duties, it makes it. Plus, given that there's a lot of jobs in the area for contractors, a lot of people come back to this area. It's a beautiful place to be. It's a beautiful place to live. They come back and they've already got a leg up to go back because with that statute 6113, you know that whole idea of it really, that presumption that it really should be an equal arrangement or substantial time with both parents, that helps them and they don't have to beat out that substantial change issue, which is the hardest thing we have to do regularly. Is that modification is just very, very tough. So
And just to put a little context to it, when they talk about the substantial change, um, and that you haven't approved that for a modification, that's an extraordinary burden. It's one of the highest burdens in the law to prove, and to have that removed is just game changing. And I think that could really be used in a lot of ways to help military families or military parents who can move back to the area or get their orders changed or get out the military and move back. And I was happy to see that addition because I've often thought that um, if I move back, or why shouldn't I be able to get a better schedule or a schedule that's not based off of a long distance arrangement? Um, David, what about, representing military families in the Pensacola area in regards to property values and equitable distribution? What unique things do you see there?
Well, we were just, I mentioned them kind of briefly when we first started on the topic of military, but, military they get paid a little bit differently. They get BAH and BAS, and then they get a base pay. They also, a lot of them, when they're retired, they're going to get a VA disability portion, and maybe they get retirement too. And all of those things, your VA disabilities, are not taxable, but it's still considered income. I have a lot of big misconception of people believing that, hey, that doesn't count as my income because it's a disability pay for support, alimony and support. As from a dissolution perspective, with military, it just, like I said earlier, it adds to the layers of, you know, the spouse and the kids are entitled to, the spouse is entitled to, their marital portion of the military retirement. Should that member retire in the future? I think a lot of people have a misconception of I have to be married 10 years to even qualify for that. And that's just not the case. There's a formula used for that, to calculate your percentage. It also creates issues in property of we have a lot of in and outs with the real estate market and VA loans and VA assumptions versus refinance. There's a lot of options that military members and spouses have going through a dissolution that would not normally be available to the civilian population regarding assumptions of loans and things of that nature. So I think it just adds additional layers to the property rights.
Yeah, I know that. I hear that a lot. I haven't been married 10 years, so my spouse can't get any of my military retirement. And it's my understanding, and I don't hold myself out to be an absolute expert in military retirement. Um, I do confer a lot of times with you and quadro lawyers and retirement lawyers. Because those things are very specific at times. Um, but it's my understanding that the 10-year rule is you get paid from DFAS directly if you have 10 years or more. It's not an entitlement. It's just how you get paid as opposed to your spouse writing a check to you each month. DFAS will actually split, which is the department of the government that handles military retirements. DFAS will actually cut you a check for your portion. Is that correct, David?
I would agree. Yes, it is. It is the idea that DFAS is going to pay you directly versus the spouse or the payor having to pay to the other spouse. And one thing, even the payor may want to think about is, hey, well, if it's only been a few years, do you really want to? You're going to do another. Say you're only 5 years into your military service, in another 15 years, are you going to want to turn around and start cutting checks to the other side at the future? Y'all will have moved on with your lives by 15 years at that point. Maybe it's better to deal with it some other way. So, you're trying to be flexible in how you deal with things. But yes, the other spouse would have a property right regardless of the 10-year mark.
Yeah. I think what you're hitting on is buyouts and equalizer payments and other ways to maybe get them to relinquish their right to the retirement in exchange for, for some monetary value or some piece of property, and structuring the deal differently, which is a lot of ways smart in those scenarios that you just described. Um, David, you're a craftsman. Like I've seen you, like your woodworking and things like that. Your projects that you build for the house, and every weekend, David's like the weekend warrior who's got a dump truck of dirt or them dropping off lumber and bulk as he's building a deck. And in fact, for birthdays, Christmases, work anniversaries, David gets a power tool from the office. That's how we celebrate David. He's a DeWalt man. I won't hold that against him.
Yes, sir.
He likes DeWalt though. But the ongoing thing is every year I contact his wife and ask him what doesn't he have in the DeWalt catalog yet, and we try to get it. I think the last thing he got was a tile saw. as you were doing some tile work at your house. But how do you think, having a construction background, a craftsman type personality, and those type of skills, how do you think that shapes your approach to practicing law?
Well, first I would say thank you for the tile saw. I redid the bathroom and it's beautiful. Secondly, yes, I would say it's you kind of go if you're doing it correctly. I think it's the same process. I'm going to create a plan, whether that's a blueprint or a sketch on a piece of paper. I'm going to create an organized plan of what my plan's going to be. I'm going to rehab this bathroom or this house on this addition. I draw it out, I sketch it out, I figure out what I need to make it work. I figure out what I've got to do, what materials I've got to do, what evidence as it is I need to get everything together. And then I go to implementation of that plan of actually building it. Now, just like just like building with the legal process, unforeseen things happen. You see it all the time where you didn't know a particular fact. You've tried to dig. You may have even questioned that witness at deposition, and suddenly we find out that things were different than were previously stated, or something changes. The parties have some sort of conflict, or something new occurs. Child has some sort of issue. um, Things change. I open up a wall and suddenly I'm not just fixing the bathroom, I'm replacing a wall. We have to adapt. We adapt to that. We figure out, we speak with the client in this particular instance, and we figure out, hey, well, what's the game plan for dealing with this issue? How are we going to either magnify it or minimize it to some degree, and get it resolved? So.
Well, what's interesting for me is I grew up with a dad who's just extremely handy. You can't even walk in the man's garage. He has every tool known to man, and I'm pretty sure he may be the sole reason uh, that they keep making the Milwaukee Pack Out toolboxes, because I think he has walls of them, literally. And anyway, but I grew up in a household where I got to hold the flashlight, but I didn't really get to do anything except watch or prep, or if I did, it would last for about a second and be like, "Give me that," and he would
Yeah,
do
that's
it
the
10 times.
second. Yeah, that's the second hardest job behind family law is holding the flashlight for your dad.
Yeah, yeah, that gets you ready to litigate, though. It gives you that thick skin and that toughness you need. But anyway, and I feel bad because my son now, Gerard, who's 15, about you know, getting close to 16, he's going to be driving soon, and he's got flashlight duty sometimes now, and I catch myself, you know, uh, the older I get, becoming my dad. My wife tells me a lot of times I realize I've married my father-in-law. Um, so I've been trying to work on my flashlight or flashlight holder mentality, and get in here and you give it a shot, and I have a little bit of a better sense of humor, I think, than my dad did when he was my age, because my son will impersonate me, and when he does, I laugh. I find the humor in it, and then I think about it. I was like, is he impersonating me or is he impersonating my dad? But my point being that I didn't have a lot of experience doing stuff like that hands on. I watched it, and then the older I got in life, after practicing for years, I needed a hobby. I needed to get away from it and do something different. And while David will build you a bathroom wall, I love like taking a router and carving a wood sign, or kind of the more creative, almost artsy type of woodworking stuff. Um, and what I find, and I think I thought about it, I was like, why at almost 50 years old are you compelled to do this? But I think it's all the years of using my brain here. How can we get creative with these facts? What can I turn this into? What can I make out of these cards I've been dealt? Like, how can I get a good story going, a good angle to the case, a theme, something that will resonate with the court. And I think, exercising that part of my brain, but in a different format, is it's comfortable to me, but it's also enough away from the law. And I'll be honest with you, and I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes when I'm out there with my earphones on and I'm doing some woodworking, or just out there away from the office, and you can't hear anything and you're focused on what's right there in front of you so nobody gets hurt, or you're getting the cut right. Um, Sometimes I have my best ideas about my cases because all the noise is gone now, and and the mind is free to kind of do that. I mean, when you're running the tile saw, or you're remodeling the bathroom, or you're at the baseball park, do you ever have these like epiphany moments of like, where you're not, you've racked your brain all day, and then you step back and you do something else, and then it's just like, bam, there it is.
I think so. I think it kind of challenges you to do something else, like you said, a different part of your brain you're using, and you're actually, and it kind of has you step back from it. And I carry a little notepad in my tool belt that I wear, and I find myself every once in a while I'll be like, okay, I need to write that down. Like I need to write that down now. I'm gonna write it down, and you're going through my blueprints or something. I'm building an outdoor kitchen right now, and you're like, kitchen and somebody's name, because I triggered me to think of
Yeah,
something like I need to contact this expert. I just thought of this, so I wrote it down. So
yeah. I think it's very interesting, and you know, one thing I think that you and I have been pretty blessed with is, you know, we have really great wives, um, and I know your wife, um, Emily. I always joke around that she's a candidate for sainthood. I think you've said the same thing about Mary, because with family law, it is very time consuming. When you're dealing with people's kids and their lives, you can't help but take it home with you to some degree, and you have to sometimes carve out personal time. And I think we've both been blessed in that regard. I always tell my wife that she may be praying me into heaven one day, um, because I was like, it is a saintly thing to be married to a family law attorney, because they sacrifice as much as we do. I think with our workload, with our emotions, and I know Mary becomes a sounding board a lot of times for me, for cases, and facts, and hey, what do you make of this fact? What do you make of that fact? If Mary understands it and it strikes the same emotional chord with her, and she's appalled by it, or she thinks that's strong, sometimes I use her as like a litmus test of what because I've noticed there are times where I'm hung up on a fact, and I think it's the best thing since sliced bread, and other people don't. It doesn't carry the weight it carries because I'm seeing it through my lenses, and that's important to me. But I wanted to give you an opportunity, David, before we sign off, to to thank your wife and tell her hello.
yeah,
I don't want to see
yeah,
you become a blue file up here, David.
that's true. Emily, hey, that is definitely my better half. 15 years of the greatest decision I've ever made. Obviously, I do the same thing. I use her as a sounding board. I also use you as a sounding board a lot too, because I'm like, what would you do? And it's not always legal. It's like, hey, like, does
I would
this does this
I
sound
would
reasonable?
order the lumber and go ahead and build your shed.
Oh yeah,
I
oh
think
yeah.
Emily will forgive you.
But yeah, I'm just so blessed to have the family dynamic I have, that they understand. It takes the right person to understand that you're going to be at work late, and you're going to go, there are going to be things missed, even like the baseball things. Hey, some of those things, hey, we got something gets in the way, it gets in the way. It is what it is, but we're there as much as we can be. And hey, we have to take a phone call sometimes that we don't want to take. And we eat into each other's sleep at times. But yeah, we're just very blessed to have the dynamic to say, hey, I need a reasonable opinion of from your position as a mom,
Yeah.
what do you see if somebody did this? Like if they say this, what would you do? And not the blow up bluster. Oh, I do this, this, and this. Like I need the reasonable, and I expect, and I get that. I feel like so it's awesome.
Yeah.
Very blessed.
Mary's favorite story about me is we were at Universal Studios. We had got onto the King Kong ride. I didn't tell anybody, but I had just received a text message that we had a case where um, someone had taken a child that didn't have permission to take the child. And we're in the middle of the King Kong ride. I let them get distracted. I break out the iPhone and move the 3D glasses up, and I'm sitting here thunder thumping, and all of a sudden I'm busted. I look at my wife staring at me like, you're on vacation. What are you doing? And I was just, I had to come clean. I was like, I'm writing a motion for pickup order, an emergency pickup order, because someone's child was taken, and that takes priority over everything else. I tell people who are coming into family law, or maybe marrying into family law, if you're going to be the spouse of a family law attorney, that it's a lot like the military. I never was in the military, and I don't mean to make light of military service. Thank all of you out there for your service and your commitment to our country and the sacrifices. But you have orders, you have obligations. It's over when the judge says it's over. What the judge tells you is going to happen. It's no different than like a military order. That's what's going to happen. We are charged with following those orders, and we have a duty and an obligation to protect our clients' rights, and they're the same way that the military is there to protect our constitutional rights and our freedoms. And you know, if you get a phone call in the middle of the night and you have to go work on something, or the judge says that we're going to see you tomorrow morning. I was talking to a lawyer yesterday, told me that the judge set a 7 a.m. hearing. That was the first time I'd ever heard that early, and that they were going to have to make that happen and rearrange schedules to make it happen. That's what you do. But
I remember that, you're talking about those situations. Not too long ago, we had that same pickup order issue in Lee County, and then we were having trouble getting the sheriff. The guy had flown in from California. It's Sunday, and we're literally, you're at a or maybe it was Saturday because you were at a bar conference for the legislative committee or something. You're there in a committee meeting or meeting with, meeting with the judges, and I'm calling you because I've now talked to the sheriff's office on Saturday. I've got my paralegal on the phone over here. It's 8 o'clock at night, and you're at you're at a dinner, you're at a banquet you're supposed to be at, and
yeah,
we're all trying to work this problem. And ultimately, it makes you feel good at the end of the day, because then at 12 o'clock at night, when we finally got the sheriffs on board, he got to take his child back to California, and that's what makes the difference is, you don't have your wife understands that. And
yeah,
my wife's like, I would want the same thing for my family. And that's all you can ask for.
yeah. I had a law school professor, and when he said it, I had no idea what he was talking about. I was just, a young kid, and he kept saying, "The law is a jealous mistress. The law is a jealous mistress." And I'm thinking, what is a 75, 80-year-old guy talking about jealous mistress? And now I get it. If you have to, if you're not paying attention to it, if you put it down, if it's supposed to be the weekend, that's when it's going to demand attention, and you have to give it the attention it deserves, and you got to balance that with your family. But David, I told you when we started, it would go by in the blink of an eye, and we shoot for about 45 minutes, and we're now over an hour. So
All
David,
right.
surely we'll get you back on, and um, you know, we could talk about so many different family law issues. And remember, anybody out there who's listening, if you can, please like, subscribe, share. The whole purpose of this is to just get information out into the community about family law, and family law in Florida. to give you, whether you're an attorney who's just getting into family law and looking for some information, or if you're about to go through a family law case or in the middle of one, you're just looking for good general information on a topic. That's what we're here for. That's why we do it. And please like, subscribe, share. I want to say that we're about 4,980 subscribers currently. So my wife has been, leading the charge on that. So if we can get up to 5,000, that would make her happy. So I'm asking everybody out there, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and help us get the word out to people who could really use this. And David, we'll have you back on, and maybe the next time I'll reverse chairs with you, and you can question me.
All right, that sounds like a blast. Thanks for having me, Gerard. And guys, if you have a legal issue, come see me in the Pensacola area. I'll be glad to give you, what I believe to be the best advice I can. So thanks.
Thank you.